Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet, a digital lifestyle magazine for women. Every week, our editor-in-chief, Kelly Castillo, along with Megan Block and special guests, participate in a deep dive discussion about recent articles and topics we have covered. We invite you to become part of our community where everyone's welcome. You can totally sit with us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to She's a Full-On Monet. I'm your host, Kelly, and I have with me, as always, Megan.
Hi, Kelly. Good to
Hi.
see you.
Nice to see you. How you doing?
Good. It's officially spring now. I'm
Yes.
so excited. Even though I look outside and it's like, not, but well, spring is a combination of what, like super hot and super cold. That's kind of how it runs. Southern California.
Layering season.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure.
but I think spring's like the official start of spring is March 20th. So spring's my favorite. I'm so happy.
Yeah, we just celebrated. Last week was Persian New Year, which is this spring equinox, which is, I'm not Persian, but my husband is. And it's one of my favorite holidays of the year because it's like the traditions are all about you clean out your house like completely and clean out your closets. And you're supposed to also clean out your life like mentally, meaning that if you've had an argument with someone, you're supposed to go and repair it. And you're supposed to start the new year kind of like completely fresh with a super clean house. You get new clothes, you throw out all your old clothes and you just purge everything and you fix all your messed up relationships or arguments. And then there's a tradition where like you honor from the oldest to the youngest, the people in your family. So you're supposed to go see relatives that you don't get to see that often or friends and family. And you start with the oldest and you work your way down. So it's really actually kind of a cool holiday.
I've never heard of that. It's like an ultimate life, like to-do list to get a hard reset or something. That's really neat.
Yeah.
I
think it's a nice
that.
tradition. I mean,
it's a really nice tradition, and it comes from a good place of all aspects, of like not just making your house look better, yourself look better. It's like repairing other things. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. It has a good feeling, just kind of a refresh, a restart, which I think everybody needs now and then.
A life spring clean or whatever, because we do spring cleaning. That's kind of like what, but it doesn't go past like drawers and the bathroom and your closet. So that's cool.
Yeah. Well, today's topic I think is really interesting. It's interesting even for me as someone whose kids are grown and out of the house. But I think, you have kids at home, like you're right in the thick of it. So this should be an interesting topic for you also.
Yes.
We are talking about parenting today and specifically the differences in the way we parent our children. And this is based on a book by Dr. Thomas Boyce, who's a professor of pediatrics and psychiatry at the University of California, San Francisco. And he did a study on the human stress response, specifically in children, for over 4 decades. So this was a really long, big study. And he wrote a book with his findings from that study that's called The Orchid and the Dandelion: Why Some Children Struggle and How All Can Thrive. And he discussed it on NPR. There's been a lot of articles about this, but he equates children into 2 categories, either dandelions or orchids. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I'm a big believer in parenting your children individually in different ways. They have different needs. And even the one my boys are very close in age and still could not be more different. So,
right. I mean, heaven forbid you have 2 identical children that are the same emotionally and, all the inside. It's, reading this article, I totally can see one in one and the other in the other. And I don't know. And it got me to thinking, is this an age thing? Cause I feel like maybe, I'm an older sibling and then, so I only know one perspective. But typically, I mean, my youngest is more of a resilient, as we'll get into talking about. And so I was just curious if that also has anything to do with it. If like where you are in the spectrum of age, you have 4. So you probably have a very good idea of, who is what and, how that made you kind of treat them in a specific way. Yeah. Because I remember, backstory when I nannied for you, that there wasn't one way to handle even as simple as like the morning routine, like for example, and getting them going in the morning, like it didn't work for everyone the same way. You know, you had to treat each unique one in a different way because, you know, that they responded differently. So this is very cool. Another thing, like the last time we were talking about the potato and the egg and the coffee bean.
Yeah.
Find a physical something to relate it to something that we need to make sense of, you know, in order to steer our behavior. So I find
and I want to tie this in. I just finished a book that was really interesting to me, and it's called Running on Empty. And it's about as a child of parents who emotionally neglected you, or as a parent who's trying to avoid emotionally neglecting their children. It's all about the different types of emotional neglect and what that turns into when those children become adults. And the whole book is not like these extreme examples of emotional neglect, like abusive examples. It's all about like parents who mean well and are good people and are trying their best, but they do different things that show emotional neglect to their kids. And one of the examples is very on topic today, because it's basically parenting your child exactly, your 2 or 3 or 4 or however many children exactly the same, instead of getting to know them individually and taking their individual personalities and characters into account. So having like, you know, dressing them the same, having the same bedtime, having the same rules, having the same consequences when children are so individual, and how that can actually kind of create a form of emotional neglect because you don't, know your children on an individual level. It's interesting. It was a very interesting book. I think it's really helpful for parents.
It's literally my biggest fear, because we all mean well, but we all are like, is something I'm doing, like subtly over time, like making a big problem for my child, like whatever that is, like, am I ruining them in some way because I'm doing this over time, subconsciously?
Yeah. And the thing I love about this book is that there's no blaming at all. It's not, they're not shaming any parent for anything that they did. Some of the circumstances that they're describing are not avoidable, like parents who are grieving, parents who have a child with physical health issues or disability issues that need extra attention. So the result is that the other children in the family don't have as much attention. It's a very interesting book because at no point do they make you feel like bad about any of the stuff. They're just telling you, this is what this can look like later in life. And if this was your situation growing up and now you're dealing with these consequences of it, here's how to heal it and get through it. So it's really interesting. I thought it was an interesting book. If anyone has been in that situation or feels that they want to know more about it, I would highly recommend that book. And I have a Kindle membership, and it was one of the free Kindle reads. So that just makes it even better, in my opinion.
Did that change your actions after reading the book at all, or make you understand things better?
I already parented my children.
Right? You're like, going back in time now. But I mean, come on, like we kind of, yeah. Did it give you perspective maybe on something about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that it resonated with me the most is that I do have a really great father who loves me, so much. And I have a great relationship with him, but I had a single father who also needed to work to support my sister and I. So we were alone a lot. And so there was not rules in our house. I never had chores. I never had boundaries as a teenager. And, my dad was just kind of busy. So I did.
When you moved out, where it was like cleaning and all that foreign to you, or you naturally?
Yeah, I did not know how to do laundry. I did not know how to do dishes. I flooded my apartment the first time I tried to do dishes because I put the liquid dish soap in the dishwasher. It said dish soap on it. I didn't know.
We've all been there. I was just, there were things that I was responsible for as a kid, but there were certain things that from 0 to 18, 19, my mom did or dad did. And I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't even know that I had to separate I thought that was just for like some people being crazy. Like I didn't know much about, and I've done the dish thing too, the dish soap thing too. It's just because, and then I realized like, oh, they weren't trying to like be lazy and didn't want to clean their own bathroom. They were trying to teach me life skills so that when I moved out, I knew how to clean my own bathroom. So I try and remind my kids that, because I honestly thought for a very long time they were just trying to get out of cleaning certain things.
Yeah, no, I had no idea how to do anything. I'd never run a vacuum cleaner. I didn't know how to cook anything, not even basic things. I tried to iron my clothes thinking I was being super adult. I burnt everything. Like it was really bad. But you know,
yeah, I mean,
my dad also didn't even clean in front of us. We would go to bed and then my dad would clean the entire house. I was going to say,
if you were not around, if you were alone a lot because he was working, how did you not have to do that stuff yourself?
Yeah, my dad would come home from work.
He would come home and just do it all too.
And we would eat frozen food or takeout or something. And then we would go to bed and he would clean the entire house. And we'd wake up in the morning and it was like magical fairies cleaned the house. I saw him mow the lawn on Saturdays, but I never saw him do any of that stuff.
Oh, wow. Oh no. The minute we turned capable, my mom and dad divided that stuff up and made a long list. And that was what Saturdays were. And I was like hating it because none of my friends had it. But now I'm like, well, at least I know how to clean a toilet, like no one had to teach me that,
The hardest thing for me was that my dad is a severe perfectionist. So I had an absolutely spotless house growing up, but I had no idea how it got that way. So when I moved out on my own, my expectations were that my house had to be perfectly spotless, but I had no idea how to make that happen. I didn't even know what cleaning products to use for what. And like, I wasn't even aware of any of that.
I'm just surprised because of his schedule and his situation. He wouldn't have like thrown that off just to like relieve some stuff off his back. Cause that's a lot of work. Like I'd be like,
no, but he's
capable,
He's the type of perfectionist that if we had done something, he would have redone it.
Okay. So he's he likes things clean, but he also likes things a certain way. So it's better to do it himself. I'm that
absolutely
way. I'm that way. That's not, can't be good. You're telling me this isn't good because you're saying you're a product of this situation. I totally clean my kids' stuff because it's like, I got to do it again anyway. But yeah.
But like, I can tell you that for myself and being alone so much when I was a kid and not having anyone there if I, fell off my bike or needed a paper signed after school, or because he commuted also to LA. So he, would get home just in time to like give us some food if we hadn't ordered pizza already and put us to bed.
Wow.
So we were latchkey kids after school. I walked home from school by myself. I let myself in and I was alone for hours. So I learned to rely on not anyone else for things like, just logistical stuff or emotional stuff. And so now I'm super uncomfortable when people try to help me. I'm super uncomfortable. I just like, please don't do that. I don't want, and I don't like people asking me personal questions. I don't like people like helping me unless, they're there to help me. Like I have an amazing assistant. I couldn't do my life without her, but like my kids try to help me with stuff and I'm like, no, stop that. I can't. Yeah. I have a really hard time with it. But I have more awareness now. This book really did help me see things in like a different way. And,
I love situations that wake us up, but we're like, well, now what? Like I'm aware of the situation. Now what do I do?
We're all a work in progress, right?
Well, for anyone who hasn't read the article, we should talk about what a dandelion and an orchid are so we can
let's talk about it. So, like dandelions, who, I mean, you guys have seen dandelions, they can grow anywhere. They can grow in between cracks in the pavement. They can grow in your grass. They're I wouldn't call them a weed because they are flowers. They're pretty, but they grow anywhere. They're very resilient.
They're very aggressive.
Yeah. And dandelion children are a resilient bunch of children. They can cope better with stress and hardship and change, whereas orchid children are more sensitive. I would say the dandelion children are the majority of children. Orchid children are the minority of children, and they're more sensitive to their environment. They're more physically reactive to changes of circumstances. They have a harder time coping with stress. So they can't be parented in the same way that dandelion children can be parented. And I think as parents, I was going to say as mothers, but I think this is not gender specific. As parents, we know our kids. We should at least know our kids enough to know in each situation how they're going to react and whether or not they can handle
Mhm.
So, I mean, like when a lot of times I know as parents, if we're going through something, like one of the parents has a health diagnosis or they're talking about separating or lost their job, something that they're dealing with personally, and we think we're helping our kids by not sharing that information with them and protecting them, they can tell something's going on. And I mean, dandelion children maybe just be like, that's weird. Mom's acting a little funny, but let's just go about our day. Whereas orchid children would be more sensitive to those subtle changes, and perhaps, start worrying, because you go to the worst case scenario, right? You think, oh, mom's acting funny. Oh my God, maybe she has a cancer. Maybe she's leaving me. Like, they will take it. Their imagination might be worse than whatever the actual thing is. So you got to know your individual children.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I think that's probably the key of, most parenting. Know your kid.
Yeah. Or just be in tune to the subtle differences between the two when, something that's stressful comes up, or a change of environment. I have what I feel like are one of each. And so I can just tell by the way that one handles it and one doesn't, how that I cannot parent them the same way, because, if identically the same situation happened, they wouldn't react in the same way, and they wouldn't recover in the same way, so, and they need things differently. One just needs a bit more communication. She's always very in tune to the environment and almost trying to see if there is a negative situation in the room to, focus on. It's it's not the easiest thing, but it comes with understanding that's just who they are. And when you have an orchid child, you don't necessarily try and force a dandelion type of personality on them. You adjust and specifically address them in that sort of fashion. You don't try and push being a dandelion on them because it's easier for you.
Yeah. And that's one thing. I don't think that there's a way to turn an orchid child to a dandelion child. I mean, it is it's your nature. But the study was really interesting because he observed a couple of different stress responses. And one of them was the cortisol hormone in your body, which is a response to stress, the amount of cortisol in your body. And cortisol, even, I mean, for adults and for children alike, can affect your immune response, and it can affect your cardiovascular function. So it's an important hormone to track and understand. And he also tested the fight or flight response, which is your autonomic, am I saying that? I don't know. Autonomic.
Oh,
it's the nervous system, but I don't think I've ever had to say that word out loud.
Me neither. And I'm like, oh, it's you look at it and you've heard it. You're like, that'll be easy to say if I ever need it. And then here it is. And I'm like, oh, it could be one of three things. But we all know what you're saying and implying.
Okay. The nervous system, fight or flight. We know what that is.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from the training that I've done in my work with foster children, the fight or flight response has a tremendous effect on children. Children who live their lives in the fight or flight mode, which a lot of children in the system do, they have a harder time absorbing information. They have a harder time learning. They'll end up way behind in school because they can't focus. They will end up with digestive issues, with issues with growth. There's a lot that goes with the fight or flight response. So it isn't something that's just like, an adrenaline rush or something. This is a feeling where your body feels that it's in danger, and it has a physical reaction. So they had asked a large amount of children in a lab to undergo a series of tasks. And some of them were like remembering a series of numbers. Some of them was like physical tasks, like putting lemon juice on their tongues to provoke a response. And what they found was that there was a huge difference among the two groups of children. There was a group of children who had a really dramatic response to whatever the stimulus was in both their cortisol system and their fight or flight system. And then there were other children who had almost no biological response. And that's really interesting to me, because it affects physically. I mean, not just like your mental challenges, but it affects physically so much. Stress in the body can cause so many health issues, especially lifelong stress. I mean, if you're just a person who has a high stress response.
Or you just like have always been in, like, some people come from really stressful environments that they, grew up in and stayed in and lived their whole life in. And it's just like, it's so sad that it's such a big factor.
Yeah. And so Dr. Boyce had said that his research showed that the children who respond to stressors have a higher response to the stressors. It could be a precursor to a lot of health problems, emotional and physical health problems. It's not great news for the orchid children, because they're more likely to have like respiratory disease, pneumonia, asthma, behavioral issues, anxiety, depression. I mean, there's so many symptoms that come from that stress response, and it's a susceptibility to it. Doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to have these issues, but if they are more susceptible to those kinds of stress responses, and they have a stressful home life, or they face specific challenges, he said it can impact their ability to build their immune system against viruses and bacteria. It could in their adult life predispose them to high blood pressure, cardiovascular risk, things like that. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, that does. Yeah. I mean, it's doesn't sound good.
No.
And
I have two of each, 2 dandelion children, and I would say 2 dandelion children and 2 orchid children. I know for sure I have 1 orchid child.
Yeah.
And she falls right into this whole situation. Mm-hmm. She has a very serious fight or flight response. What her doctor calls a vasovagal response. I think we've talked about it before, where she has a physical response to stress that causes her to pass out, causes seizures, causes a super elevated heart rate, low oxygen levels. And the long term of that is anxiety. It is a heart issue. It is digestive issues and things that present like she has had to see a infectious disease specialist, because she has a really hard time. Her body has a really hard time letting go of viruses and bacteria. She has a really weakened immune response. So reading this, it's like a laundry list of things that I've dealt with my orchid child. And I can tie those periods of illness right in with a stress trigger. I mean, it's like looking at the calendar, it's undeniable. So the times in her life when she's had a very severe bout of illness she's been brought on by the loss of a close friend, a traumatic loss like that, or something, in her life that it's clear. It was clearly triggered by a stress response, which it sounds crazy to think that, her reaction to like a virus in her body lines up perfectly timing wise with a, serious stressor in her life. But it's hard for me to deny, because I've seen it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you do? Right? That's the question. If you have orchid children, what do you do? Mm-hmm. I know that my orchid children do best when they have a routine that they're familiar with, and that they know what to expect from day to day. They do better when I've told them ahead of time, this is what we're going to do this day, and then we're going to do this day. And so there's not a lot of surprises or chaos, because you can't change them. So we have to honor their differences and meet them where they're at. And I know the one of my children who I would consider the most orchid, she needs quality time from me on a one-on-one basis more than any of the other kids ever have. And just kind of affirming or reassuring that everything is fine in her life, and that whatever she's faces, that she's gotten through worse before and she will be fine. She messaged me today with her picture of her face crying, and said that she had watched a sad movie and that when she watches sad movies, she has to repeat. We've worked on this. She repeats to herself, it's not real. It's not real. That person is fine. That person is an actor. This is not a real scenario. Because if it's especially if there's like pets in the movie or anything.
Oh, my Orchid's the same way. We were watching a movie the other day, like an old Disney Channel movie, and there was one part where like this girl was mean to a dog, like actually really mean to a dog, was like saying stuff that was not nice, and Emma was like genuinely upset that this dog named Murphy was being talked to this way. And I'm like, I get it. She's very empathetic, especially to animals. And it's almost like I gotta like reel her back into reality. So the fact that you have something to say already lined up, because it's like, girl, come on. But I get it. Oh my gosh. Did she ever watch those like adopt an animal commercials where they're like,
oh no. No. She will regularly call me and say, Mom, can I watch this movie? or will I have a seizure?
She'll get it approved by you, like,
and I'll be like, if your boyfriend's with you, I think you'll be okay, but not by yourself alone in your apartment. Definitely not. Or some movies I've told her, absolutely not. You can't watch that movie. It's too sad.
It will trigger you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But she knows to ask.
Yeah. Because she doesn't want to get into the thick of it, if you would say that, and be already there and triggered, and then have to deal with it.
Yeah. I think it's a really difficult situation, because on one hand, the only way to prepare your children for the things that life is going to throw at them is to kind of nudge them a little bit out of their comfort zone and help them experience things, give them challenges that are within their capability to meet, and then remind them, oh, hey, but you met this challenge and you did it great. But it's a fine line, because you don't want to put them in situations that overwhelm them, that are too much.
Or coddle them where they're, out in the blue and trying to figure out laundry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like a mistake I made with my youngest, but because she's the youngest and she has 3 older siblings who protected her, and me who protected her, and she didn't have life experiences that put her in circumstances that were super stressful or painful or challenging for her when she was little, other than health issues, but she didn't experience anything really rough. And we all like babied her a little bit, for sure. But as she got older, when she was a teenager and she had a pretty traumatic loss of a friend, that was something that she was not prepared for emotionally. She not only did she have the grief and loss of losing a friend, and it was a kind of a public and a little bit of I don't want to say violent way, but it was traumatic for sure. So she had that to deal with. And then secondly, she was, it was her sweet 16. That was the day that it happened. She had to deal with her own mortality and the idea that someone her age could pass and that life would go on, which it wasn't so much for her the idea that, yes, I am also a vulnerable person. All humans are vulnerable. And just because you're young doesn't mean you're going to have a long, long life ahead of you necessarily. But it was the idea for her, the part that was the most traumatic was the watching everyone else, her friends and schoolmates, move on so quickly. In her mind, they didn't really move on that quickly. There was a lot of grief. There was a lot of support from the school. There was a lot of, parental involvement and stuff.
No, but it is a trip. I mean, you can hear about a really traumatic story about a person you don't know, and everyone else's life is going on, and some people don't even know about it. It's life is a trip when you can put those thoughts together and realize that like grief is a personal thing, and it's like there's no timeline for it, and everyone's is different, and you can't be angry at someone for what you feel like is moving forward, but at the same time, it's that first steps of realizing those things can be,
It was really hard for her to
it's
see
it's
her
it can
friends
roughen
go-
you up a
yeah.
little bit, you know?
Yeah, because a lot of her friends in her mind went back to talking about frivolous things and boys and dances and stuff too quickly for how significant this loss was.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, how are people, like, he existed, he was our friend, he, you know, and everyone's moving on to the next thing. And for her, that was really hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Absolutely.
happened again her freshman year of college. So 2 years later, it happened again. And this friend she was even closer to. And it was just, she flew home from college the day that it happened. She couldn't stay there. She was, I mean, like devastated. So I think both of those times she had an illness that happened right afterwards. So I think her immune system just kind of dropped, and whatever was, you know, in her body already just came to the surface. But she's definitely the sensitive child for sure.
Yeah. Is that something she's always been like ever since she was like young? Has that always been like a personality trait you've always seen? Or has that been
her
time?
from the time she was like 4 too. She was not like overly emotional or overly hypersensitive as a child, but she also did need probably the most attention that any of the kids had needed. And she was also kind of the most sheltered. So I think it was a combination of that. She had never been challenged with a big stress activity in her life. So it was, I mean, how do you know, right? Unless, like I had gotten divorced. And so the other 3 kids had been through that process, which was a big stressor for all of us, a big change of life circumstances. We moved out of the area that they had lived in for their whole life at that time. So the other 3 went through some big life changes and handled it each individually, some better than others. But she was too young. She didn't have those challenges. Her life was pretty consistent. I mean, I don't think she has memories from before because she was too small.
Is this something we not outgrow, but do we all eventually become generally dandelions if we aren't? Or is this something we carry on throughout our life as adults?
I know a lot of adults who are way more sensitive than others. I think you can build resilience, and you naturally build resilience as you deal with things. Because you can tell yourself with confidence that you've lived through a worse situation and you've handled it okay. And that gives you some confidence. But I know what, like for her, if she's in a new circumstances and she doesn't know the protocol for something, she's uncomfortable immediately. She like rather would not go try it. Like if she doesn't know how something works, she doesn't want to put herself in that situation. And some people are opposite of that, right? They're super adventurous and they want to try new things and learn new things and like they always want to be outside of their comfort zone. She likes her comfort zone. She likes to stay right there in it.
Me too. Yeah, I get that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I get wary when I'm walking into a situation. I don't know what to expect. I always like to be with someone else who has been in that situation and can kind of walk me through it, whether it's anything. Like if you think back to, if you have a memory of like the first time you flew on a plane, you know, you're usually like a kid and with a parent or somebody who explains to you, now you have to put your bag on this thing, and now you have to do this, and now you take your shoe off. But if you're an adult when that happens and you've never flown in a plane before, can you imagine how uncomfortable that is? Everyone else knows what they're doing and they're rushing you through the security line, and they know. You don't know. How would you know unless someone told you that you have to take your laptop out of the bag and take your shoes off? Like everyone's just doing this thing and you're standing there like, someone help me.
Yeah, totally.
And it's the same, like if you're uncomfortable in new situations and you're uncomfortable asking people, hey, what do I do now? Like that kind of situation would be very challenging. And if you can imagine that circumstance, flying for the first time as an adult at your age, and imagine how you would react to that, that will probably tell you if you're more of a dandelion or an orchid.
You know what? I equivalate that. I've never done it, but I've heard enough stories, and your orchid could tell me one way or another. Moving to New York is the ultimate tester in like, because she is that, and then she moved to like one of the busiest cities in the world. And did she live alone, or was there someone that she knew that she lived with that knew the city well that she could rely on to figure things out, or was this all new to her?
No, she lives on her own, but she had been to the city multiple times before.
Okay.
And her best friend since kindergarten lives literally 2 blocks from her.
Okay.
So she has that friendship where they see each other all the time, and she got kind of showed around the city by that friend.
There's just something about being new in a big city like that. I mean, even if you don't even know what to do when your electricity doesn't work, or that doesn't work, and can't call mom and she can't come down the street, that's got to be such a tester of, are you, pushing your dandelion ability.
Yeah. And she loves New York, and she's super happy. She's struggling a bit with homesickness. I mean, I FaceTime with her every day, multiple times a day. And I'm opposite of her in a lot of ways. When I love New York to visit, but I could not live there. When I'm in New York, I feel very isolated and alone in a different way than I do when I'm in California, because there's so many people around me, but they're all strangers. And she feels opposite. When she's surrounded by people, even if they're strangers, she feels less alone. She feels like she'll go sit in a cafe to do her homework so that there are people around her, rather than doing it in her apartment by herself. And I'm opposite of that. To be around people who are not interacting with me, and they're not like my friends and family, makes me feel isolated. To her, it makes her feel less isolated. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's very much a personal thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's doing great. I couldn't move out that. I'm pretty sure I'm an orchid, and I don't think I could move out to a big city like that and, be so away from the things that feel familiar to me, and also in an environment that I don't feel like I can generally control, because, oh my gosh, you can't control anything in New York. It's crazy out there. So
yeah, but she has a dog who is her emotional support animal, and that has helped a lot, because there's some accountability, right? She has to get up and go out of her apartment in the daytime and take her dog out. And she, that he is a source of great support for her. Mm-hmm. But she does have, what the doctors have said is that vasovagal response. So there's a nerve. I think we talked about this in one episode. Yeah. There's a nerve that runs like basically right up the center of your body that,
we talked about how you calm it.
Yeah. She'll put an ice pack on her chest or on the back of her neck. And, it's really interesting, because, I had never even heard of that before. She started having some of these symptoms. That was not even anything that had ever come up in my 40 years of life at that point. But it was interesting to, I think it's easy as a parent, if you are not an orchid, and if you are like me, I wouldn't say I'm not overly emotional. I'm not emotional almost at all. I'm an unemotional person. I'm very logical. I handle things in a very logical way. And so I look at situations and I problem solve, and I don't like react necessarily. So when you see your child and they have such extreme reactions to emotions, and it's easy to say like, oh, just, I don't want to say like buck up, but like, it's all in your head kind of thing, or you're overreacting, or just calm down.
Downplay it in a way.
Yeah. And first of all, that's super not helpful. But I think it would have been my instinct to kind of try to rationalize with her and get her to see that logically she's overreacting, except for the fact that her emotional responses to things and her emotional response to stress triggers is physical. So it's hard for me to tell her, oh, just calm down, you're overreacting, if she's literally passing out and having a seizure. That's hard to ignore.
You can't talk your way out of a seizure.
No. And for me to tell her that she has control over this, and she needs to, control her emotional response when she's literally unconscious on the floor. It made me realize how ridiculous that kind of advice is, because I have given that advice to some of my other kids. like that you need to just calm down. You're overreacting. You're being silly. Like, let's look at this logically. What you're worried about is not very likely to happen. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and in my mind, I thought I was helping. I thought, oh, if I can just get them to see that logically, this isn't as bad as they think it is, they'll calm down.
It's like when we were trying to tell people to, you know, when leaving space for them, that article that we did about holding space for people,
Yeah.
you know, you have to be selfless in that sense and not try and like downplay their situation. Although trying to be helpful, I think it's just our natural response as humans. I don't know what it is, because you know you're doing damage, but you're like, I don't know what else to do in this moment. You don't want them to freak out, so you try and say the thing that you think will help, and then you realize you're just doing more damage, you know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, her story is her own story, and I'm not at all trying to make it about me. But parenting her taught me some really valuable lessons, and made me much less smug of a person, thinking that my way was the right way for everything. And that, you know, I have a tendency to see emotional responses as weak. And it really kind of knocked that out of me, and was a valuable lesson for me to learn, because with my oldest child, who's also on more of an orchid than a dandelion, he has different responses to things. You know, he self-medicated as a response to anxiety and stress triggers for a decade. And I was super sympathetic to his situation and very supportive of everything, you know, that he was going through to get him back to a healthy place, which, you know, he's in a very healthy place now. He's doing fantastic, but it was a road to get there. And it's hard for me sometimes to see some of those like emotional reactions or coping mechanisms as not seeing them as weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So I mean, with him, I had to learn that, you know, mental health issues are health issues, and addiction issues are sicknesses. It's an illness. That was something that I had never experienced or been around my whole life. So, you know, society and the media and stuff, when I was a kid, when it was like, just say no, you know, the Nancy Reagan stuff, was very much that like, addiction issues are a choice that you make, and that you have control over it and all this stuff. And parenting a child with those issues also taught me really valuable lessons about how mental health is health. And I had this superiority complex because I had no mental health issues. I had no addiction issues, and never something that I had faced. But having someone that you love more than anything in the whole world dealing with those is humbling. And it teaches you a lot about the frailty of human nature, and makes you so empathetic to people who do deal with mental health issues, because I saw him fight for years. And it's like, you can't do it for them, and you can only, you know, be supportive. And y'all, the whole time you're questioning if you're enabling by being supportive, or if you're helping, or if they need tough love, or if they need love. And you're like, everything you do, you just assume it's wrong. I never dealt with anything like that in my life. And thankfully, I take absolutely no credit for it. It's completely him and his strength as a person, but he's healthy and he's thriving, and I'm super proud of him. But parenting those two orchid children of mine really taught me that everything I knew, you know, my assumptions were wrong. and going off of the assumption that all my assumptions were wrong, I, you know, learned all about human nature, and all of the struggles that maybe I don't personally have to face, but the people that I love with my whole heart are facing. So it's, changes you big time.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the scariest thing in the world is, I mean, I always say this, you can only be as happy as your most unhappy child. And it's rough when you have a child who's going through serious issues like that, anxiety that they can't control, or addiction issues, or depression. I've been there through all those things, and it's terrifying, because if your child has a broken leg or the pneumonia or something, you know exactly what to do. and it's very clear, and you go and you fix the thing. And there's just, this is the protocol. We're going to give the antibiotics, and we're going to, do a breathing treatment, or we're going to put the leg in a cast, and we're going to do surgery next week. And you feel better. You feel like, okay, we've got a plan. But when it's struggling with resilience, when it's struggling with anxiety and depression and addiction, it's not clear. Mm-hmm. There's no set plan. It's different for everyone, what works and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And you're literally just a passenger on the bus, because you can't drive the bus. You don't know where you're going. It's so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it can literally happen to any family. And I had that mindset for years, that if I did everything perfectly and I checked all the boxes, then I would never have to deal with this, because I did all the parenting things correctly. But that's not how it works. You can literally do everything perfectly and still get that middle of the night phone call, and still get that child with these issues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You can.
It does feel like a parenting failure. And that's your own ego. And you have to set that aside if you want to help your child. Having a child who struggles is the biggest ego destroyer of the world. Because as moms, we always do that, right? We get together in the mom groups and we say, oh, did you hear Johnny made the honor roll, and Sally, is head cheerleader this year. And, my other kid just did this great piano recital. And we want to celebrate our children's accomplishments. And we find such a great sense of pride in that, right? Which we should. But at the same time, if you're a parent of a child that's struggling, it feels like if you're to be praised for all the great things your children are doing, then you're also to be blamed for your children who are struggling. And it makes you less likely to ask for help. It makes you less likely to get the help that they need, because there is so much like shame and stigma around it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be addiction. It can be like depression. It can be severe anxiety. I mean, I've said this before, but like, when your kid needs braces, you have no problem calling your best mom friends and being like, hey, which orthodontist did you use? Because, Bobby needs braces, and they'll tell you, and they give you a referral. It's different if your child needs a psychiatrist, if your child needs detox. You're not going to tell anybody that, but why is that like that? Why is it so hard for us to get help when it's mental health?
Yeah. We're starting not to normalize it, but we're starting to come around a little bit and realize that that is not the way to go. Being quiet, being in the dark, making people feel like that's some sort of fault or, something they need to hide is not the way to go, because it might be you. That's exactly you. It doesn't matter how perfect an honor roll and everything it is, like it could be your child. So we should be more caring and open and loving and less hard on ourselves. I don't know what it is. It's ingrained in us, where it's literally a direct reflection of ourselves and our parenting, whether it's good or bad. I mean, if a kid is being mean to them at school, it's a reflection on us somehow, it's like, Mike, what's wrong? It's so weird how that's our first thought,
Yeah.
I don't know any mom or dad that's like, well, it's all on you, dude. Like, no, it's always on us. And it's so bizarre,
Yeah. And the times in our lives when we're dealing with this stuff and we need help and support the most is when we are least likely to reach out for it. Yeah. I had a mom village. We called ourselves the village, and these moms had my back. Like, I would call them, hey, you know what? I can't pick up so-and-so from school today. Can you pick them up? I'll get them from your house later. Oh my God, I forgot we needed cupcakes tomorrow at school. Like, where do I go? Where can I get cupcakes that look homemade by tomorrow morning? Yeah. I mean, these women I knew were close friends of mine, and I knew they loved and supported me. But when it was something that felt shameful, I was reluctant to share or ask for help or ask for support. And that's so messed up. It's so wrong. And this wasn't even that long ago. So I can't say the times have changed, and the same group, the same little village, there were more than one instance where my kids tell me a lot, and they would come to me and say, hey, I have a friend, this friend is doing this thing and I'm scared for them and it's dangerous. And so there were a couple of times where I had to make a phone call to another mom and tell them something they definitely didn't expect or want to hear. but it's what I would have wanted if it was my kid that was in danger. And I always had that with my kids. You can tell me anything in confidence, but if it's a health or safety issue, I can't keep your confidence. I will have to tell the parent. And that destroyed friendships that I had because I was the messenger. I had to tell them that something scary or dangerous was happening with their child. And while later, maybe they appreciated that I did that, at the moment, there was so much embarrassment or shame or anger or whatever it was that it really messed up some friendships. And I just, hopefully we move past this at some point. Hopefully, that those kind of stigmas are removed from the world, but I don't know how quickly we're getting there.
No.
But it's sad. I mean, it's sad that we don't feel that comfortable sharing the vulnerable moments. I mean, I'm more likely to tell my friends that I'm dealing with something embarrassing than that one of my kids is. I don't know what that says about us as parents.
We might feel this ounce of protection for them on what that information might do to their world, or if that person's like kid overhears the conversation because it was on speakerphone, then the whole school knows. Like sometimes we almost feel like that's not our business to share. Maybe, I don't know. It's like, it depends on the level of trust you have with the circle you are talking to and who you're talking to and how you feel that's going to benefit you by telling them. Sometimes just simply telling somebody something heavy, like we talked about in holding space, is just, if they don't have an answer, is just too overwhelming for the person hearing it,
Yeah.
And so we just feel like we want to save them from that. It's not shame. It's just more like saving them from the situation. But we certainly should be as open to share these things as we do about the accomplishments or the embarrassing moments about ourselves, because we need those people looking out for us. We need those angels. I don't care how angry it would make me at the moment. I'm happy to hear any of these things that might affect my child's health or safety at any moment. And I will forever be grateful to the person, because I know that I did not birth a perfect person. Okay. Like it's impossible for her not to mess up. And I know we've had this discussion where there might come a time where she might like really royally mess up, so who am I to be angry at the messenger? Like, oh, I'm pretty sure I birthed a perfect person. You must have the wrong address. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's never a thought that would come in my mind, always share with that. And always, it's just, I guess it might just depend on the person and the person you're talking to.
Yeah, I think it really does. And I'm on this podcast and in the articles that I write for the site, I'm really open about some of the stuff that I've been through and that my kids have been through from my perspective as a parent. Again, I don't tell their specific stories because it's not my story to tell. I tell my perspective of them as a parent, and that's just me, respecting that they are, individual people and that not all parts of their story are mine. Mm-hmm. But I do think being open about stuff like this, and that's why I try to be, is because a lot of people tell me that and I take this the right way. I'm not saying it that it's true. It's absolutely incorrect. People tell me all the time that, oh, your life looks so perfect from the outside. And that's easy to say because I'm very blessed. I have a lot of privileges. I understand that, but my life is by far not perfect.
Well, hence the name of
exactly. Hence the name. She's a full-on Monet, because it does look beautiful from a distance, but it's a big old mess when you look up close. And everybody's is. It's not just mine's not particularly messy. Mine's, I think, the same amount of messy as everyone's if you look close enough. Mm-hmm. But that's why I'm open about it, because I've been through these things. If anything I say ever helps someone who's going through the same or who will go through the same in their life, and maybe something I said sticks in their mind and is helpful, that's the only reason that I share any of it. It's
because you're creating content to connect. You're not creating content to paint some picture that we all know plenty of Instagram accounts or whatever accounts or TikTok accounts that look like a literal dream. They don't share the bad stuff because they're not creating content to connect. You're trying to connect to people and make them realize that like no one's life is like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to only share all of my braggy stuff about the kids and how great they're doing and how amazing they are, and it'd all be true. But I also feel like it's important for me to share the fact that, yes, we've had addiction issues in my family that have been really serious. And yes, we have, I have a child who has more than one child who has anxiety. I have children who have psychiatrists. I have children who take medication. Yes, we do what we need to do in this family to get through it and to make sure that each kid has the tools that they need to live their best life. And sometimes that means medication. Sometimes it means therapy or psychiatry. And sometimes it means, residential inpatient treatment. And sometimes it means just support. And each one of them is completely different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. No one's built the same. Sorry. Not even identical twins are built the same. They are different on the inside, and we must, treat them as such.
Yeah. So I think if you are a parent who feels that they have a dandelion child on the younger side, like you, what would you recommend people do to build resilience? I would just say, you got to push your child out of their comfort zone a little bit. Knowing what they can handle.
Know their limit. Know that they'll come out on the other side of it. Not, that you don't want to break your trust. Like I kind of think of when I take my Orchid child on like a new roller coaster that she does not like trying new things, especially things that she think might kill her on the end, Yeah. But I know that like, it's only until after you get off that roller coaster and you realize that like, oh, I lived and I had like a little bit of fun, that like, you realize that you can build some resilience as a kid. And it's important for them to see that for themselves, and man, after she got off this ride, it took her a while, because Orchid children, they don't like to admit that they, like they were wrong, and so it took her a while, but she really enjoyed it, and I want her to take that lesson on the next roller coaster and the next thing that she does, because you got to push them just a little bit to where they know, because that life's going to push them a little bit. Life might push them a lot of it. Life might knock them off of their feet and take the wind right out of their sails, sooner than they expect. You're like, you gave that example of, that extreme loss at such a young age. That's like knocking the wind right out of you in the highest extreme, and so sometimes you don't get that practice run, so if you can give them small practice runs, it might give them a little bit of resilience for when life comes and gives them those lessons,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with my kids, if they were, overthinking, maybe trying something new, it could be a sport or an instrument or a sleepover party or whatever it was. I would always tell them, like, it's okay to try something as long as you give it enough time to really try it. But if you're not enjoying yourself or you're uncomfortable, it's okay also to change your mind. And I know when I was a kid, like a lot of my friends, I didn't do sports or instruments because I didn't have a parent at home to drive me to that stuff. But some of my friends did. And then they realized that they didn't like it. And their parent was like, no, you made a commitment, you're doing it. Or we bought you a clarinet, you're playing the stupid clarinet. So I'm
on the fence about that. I don't know, because I'm also like, I paid money for this. You're doing soccer,
yeah.
Okay? But I'm also like, is that good? But I'm also like, I'm also teaching her not to quit things. But I'm also like, is that's parenting for you? You bounce back and forth of, am I messing this kid up, or no, I'm doing the right thing 50 times before you land on whatever you land on, and you hope you made the right choice. You won't know till it's over. And then they're up or they're not.
It's hard.
And welcome to parenting.
I would tell my kids that they could change their minds, but sometimes they tried to change their minds really late in the game. And I remember one time it was a sport, it was a team sport, and they didn't want to play anymore, but they were already like to a championship.
Part of it. That's when they were done. That's like really far.
And I was like, I understand that you've changed your mind and I respect that decision, but your team does not have a replacement for you this late. The position that you play is vital. And so, you're letting down. I've always taught my kids, or tried to, that it's okay to do whatever you want to do personally, as long as you're not impacting another person's right to do what they want to do.
Yep.
And that could be being loud in a restaurant or a movie theater. You don't get to spoil other people's experiences, or somebody counting on you. You said you were going to be there and they need you, and you're over it today. Like that's also not okay, because if you give your word that you're going to do something and there's people who are relying on you, then you need to do it. But I also really believe in listening to your inner voice. And if something is telling you this isn't the right fit for you, it's okay to make changes, even when it's scary. And even when you feel like you're disappointing people, or even if you feel like you're trying to talk yourself out and saying, oh, I'm overreacting. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. I can just stick this out. It's hard though, because they're both right. They're both of those things are right. You should be able to change your mind, but you also, don't want to give up on things too easily, because that also creates regret. So I guess I don't have the answer. I don't know.
Good luck. We're all figuring it out as we go. One of those things you don't know how you're doing until you see the end result and you go, well, okay.
Yeah. I feel like every question that comes up with parenting of which one of these is right, is the answer is always, it depends. It depends. It depends on the child. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on what other things that
how much manpower do I have? Like, no, you can't go to your friends after school because I have to take your sister to soccer practice and there's only one of me. Like, no, sometimes it's just like environment, circumstance, individual kid, all of the above.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just based on, your mood. Like sometimes my kids will ask me something that catches me so off guard. I'll just react and I'm like, yeah, that's no, I'm sticking with that. We're going with no on this one, like no reason, just no, it's rare, but sometimes like, and I'm like, was that the right way to go? Yeah, you know what it was,
that's when you
come into play.
That's when you invoke the age-old parenting wisdom of, because I said so.
Yeah, and it's so annoying, and it's so taking the easy way out, but my goodness, go for it. You deserve to take the easy way out sometimes. You earn this,
Yeah. So, I don't know that we've like really solved this orchid versus dandelion issue. I don't know that there is a solution, because this is just who the kids are, one or the other. I think any more awareness that you have over your individual children and their individual personalities is the connection that you need in order to be emotionally present for your child. You have to know them on that level. And
we could get frustrated as parents because sometimes we'll say something like, it's not that big of a deal, or you're like that. We'll do the things that, and it won't get us the result. And we get frustrated because we don't know what we can do to change it, or be different, or to make the situation different. Sometimes just simply hearing this and understanding it will give us the freedom to not try and change the person,
Right.
It'll allow us to let go of this idea that we can control and change this behavior, because it can be maddening sometimes, because you yourself might be a dandelion, and you might have another kid who's a dandelion, and you have this orchid that is and you might think that you can say something or do something to change the behavior, and you might just be feeling frustrated or not knowing what to, and it might be causing a wall, to be being built up. The the orchid might not be feeling understood or heard. So simply just hearing this sometimes will stop toxic patterns from continuing.
That was so well said, because all we all want as people is to feel seen and heard, and feel loved for who we are. And so anytime we're trying to change our child's nature is probably a time to reevaluate, because that all we want is for someone to say, I see you for exactly who you are, and I love you because of it, despite of it, with all of it. We all want that in our lives. That's, if you have even one person that can say that to you authentically, you're set. So I think for our kids, you're right. You need to see them for who they are and not try to change their nature, meet them where they're at, and just love on them for, be patient with them trying to raise an orchid.
it's certainly not the easier route, but you weren't given the choice and neither were they. So you need to kind of roll with whatever is going to be in their best interest over time, you know?
Yeah. And if you are one of those people who likes to control everything, the universe really likes to take those people and remind them that they are not in control.
In
So
the
maybe,
meanest of ways, may I add. Right?
yes. So maybe don't tempt fate that way.
Yeah. It's, you know, when we're such busy people and we're such busy parents and we have so much going on, it's sometimes just, it's harder to really sit down and get on their level and to take into account who you're talking to and to alter and customize your conversation to that person. It's easier not to. It's easier just to throw up the whole, like, it'll be fine. Don't stress about, like, yeah, that's easier. But, you know, if you practice this over time, your little person will become a much more understood, well-rounded, loved on, capable person, rather than just feeling so out of sorts and like, am I the problem? Or why do I feel this way? Or why is no one truly meeting me where I need to be met? You know?
Mhm.
Because just
Yeah.
simply throwing a sentence out there and then meeting the person where they really need to be met, you know, what's the point of saying that if it's only going to anger them and it's not going to stick where how you want it? Like, meet them where they need to be met, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, in every aspect. So the
Yeah.
things that we say to our children, the compliments that we give them really need to be tailored to the individual child. I mean, I have perfectionist children as well. And if I say something to them when they're little and they say we're on a ski trip and I say to one of them, you're such a good skier. One child could just take that as it's meant and say, oh, thanks, mom. And the other child could take that as, I'm cared for more when I'm the best at something and I need to be a really good skier, when that's not what I meant at all. So for that child, maybe I need to say something like, I really love skiing with you. That's it, because that's what I meant anyway. So you really
and there's no expectation being put out there.
And I'm not tying my praise to performance, because when I have a perfectionist child and I tie my praises to their performance, it exacerbates that perfectionism quality, and that can cause its own issues. So yeah, we definitely want to make sure we tailor our responses to the individual child and their needs. And it's, if you have more than one child and you have other commitments in your life, this is hard work. This takes a lot of emotional energy to parent with your fully present self and let go of how you were parented and let go of trauma and let go of other stuff going on in your life, because we are all just human beings, like, trying to do the best we can. We all have our own issues, whether it's relationship problems, work problems, health problems, whatever. And we're trying to be as present and engaged with our children as possible. We understand that that is asking a lot and nobody is going to do this perfectly. But if you're aware and you're trying, so many props go to you.
Yep. This is not like, don't shoot for A+. No one's going to get this at 100. But I mean, at least being aware is always a good first step. And then adjusting and where you can, when you can, it takes some practice, you know, but you'll certainly start to see a shift in conversation, you know, and really like a shift in your relationship and them feeling like they have a confidant in this world. Because orchid children can sometimes feel like they already are aware that there's something slightly not different, but they're just a bit more sensitive to situations and people, you know, whether it's been brought to their attention in a joking way or a serious way by someone else, you know, they're already aware that like they don't handle things the same as others, you know, so to know that they have someone that can really communicate with them in a way that they're being met and heard is going to make such a huge difference for them.
Yeah, because this world that is full of pressure and stress triggers for everyone, it only gets worse the older, to give these children the idea that they need to repress their feelings and emotions in order to be accepted in their own families. So I know a lot of us heard things like, you know, if you're going to cry, go to your room, or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah, I heard those things for sure.
Communication of, you know, your feelings are not important or valid to me and make me uncomfortable. And if you're going to be around the family, you need to repress those negative emotions. And that's not healthy for orchid children at all, because they need to be able to express emotion even if they're negative, and they need to be able to talk freely and openly with their people, their parents and family. So yeah, it's hard work. We know it. Thankfully, I feel like parenting in general is evolving. There's a lot more resources for us today than there was, I know, for my parents when I was younger. There's a lot more open communication today, and it's all going in the right direction. So please, if you guys need support, reach out. There's a lot of great communities online that, parenting groups and resources, articles, books. I can't even tell you. There's professionals, obviously. There's a lot of professional family counseling and therapists that specialize in parenting and parenting challenges. And if you feel like you need that support, or your family needs that support, definitely don't be afraid to reach out for that. And we would love to hear your guys' experiences. If you are parenting an orchid child and have tips or have, stuff you want to share, we always love to hear from you guys. You can go to Facebook and search for She's a Full-On Monet. We have a discussion group there that, we would love to hear from you. But we're all on this journey together, and there is no manual.
Nope. And no A+ student. So
No.
you stop worrying about that. Just try your best.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are all imperfect beings, and we are doing our best. And trying, to do, every generation does a little better, it seems like. So I'm excited to see and hear from all of you guys on what you're doing that works. I think there's probably a lot of people in this boat with us.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to bookmark our site, she'safullonmonet.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're enjoying this podcast, it helps us a lot if you can follow, rate, and review. See y'all next week.